And now for my next number, I'd like to return to the
classic. Time.
Welcome back, guys. The first video of 2021. It's a new year. I know, it's crazy. 2020 was a bit of a mixed year, I would say. Well,
oh my word.
That rain is coming down. But yeah, 2020, obviously we had the massive coronavirus breakout.
What the?
Which didn't really help things. Yeah, coronavirus has just made this year one of the worst years probably in history, I would say.
Great for us.
2020 for... I should say recorded music's been a good year as well. Because for live music, it's sort of mid-March, sort of everything got cancelled. I was lucky to go to 2 concerts this year when I could, back in January and February. But other than that, no concerts. But also in my personal life, 2020 was a great year. I met Jenny. We got together, we got engaged, and we also, not long after getting engaged, found out we were pregnant.
That's why I look obese.
So 2021 is going to...
see her.
You can see her, yeah. 2021 is going to introduce a beautiful little girl into this world. So yeah, you can tell 2021's been a good year for me.
2021's been a good year for you.
2020 has been a good year for me.
What's going to say?
Hopefully we make 2021 a bit better, but with a bit of luck, more music comes out next year. But yeah, anyway, enough talking about the year and stuff that's not relevant. Let's get to the top 10 of 2020. I know I did my last year, 2019, and I know I did it late. So I apologise for that. I'm not making this one late though. This has probably been one of my favourite years for music in a very long time. I listened to so much new stuff, listened to so much stuff I never thought I'd ever listen to. And when it comes to diversity, this year's been one when I've definitely branched out loads. Before I get to my top 10, I do have some honourable mentions of albums that didn't quite make the list. I want to give a massive shout out to Arctic Monkeys' Live at Raw, Live at Hall album. That I would have included it in this list, but I'm not including any live albums. So that album is not on the list, but I want to talk about it. Little Mix's Confetti didn't quite make the list. Yeah, that Little Mix and My Guilty Pleasure. And mainly because of this Jenny, but their album this year was good. It's
not fabulous.
Not fabulous, but it's also going to be their last album as a 4-piece group. So, but I still really enjoyed the album. The 3 singles they did off this album all really captivated me well, but I didn't like enough songs on the album to put it in the list. Kid Cudi's Man on the Moon 3. The Chosen is an honourable mention. The first half of his album sounds more like a Travis Scott album, and then once it gets into the second half, it does sound more like a Kid Cudi album. 1975's Nights on a Conditional Form. We were lucky enough to see them on this tour, so I had to give it that as an honourable mention. It doesn't really sound like an album to me. It's a bit too all over the place, so that's why I didn't put it on this list. Thundercats, It Is What It Is. Great album from him, his best since he put out Drunk back in 2017. But what an album that was. HMLTD, West of Eden, their debut, band out of London. Great debut album from them. Loved it. G-Bag and Ill Informed, Respect Your Elders. British hip-hop, sort of has a boom bap style to it. Very good beats, very good rhymes, and being British based, probably the best UK bass rap album of the year. Karangbin's Mordecai album, very good, but they've had better albums, particularly the one before that. And then Ozzy Osbourne's Ordinary Man. If that's going to be his last album, then I'm so glad that he's going to go out. If it is going to be Ozzy Osbourne's last album, then he's gone out on a high note. And yeah, it's brilliant. His first album in 10 years, and it was it very, very nearly made this list, but I wish I could have put it in there, but unfortunately I couldn't do it. So let's get into the top 10 here, and we're kicking off the top 10 with Everything Everything's Reanimator album. The last album they put out was in 2017, and if I had done a list then, that album probably would have made a similar spot to this album. And although I prefer their previous album to this one, this album is still very, very good. All the songs on here are winners for me. Yeah, I didn't like a lot of them, some of them, like one or two when I first heard it, but they have grown on me for sure. And technically a band from our home county, because two of the members are from our county, and then they all met at Manchester University. But yeah, Everything Reanimator, a very, very nice album, a nice little follow-up to the last album they did, A Fever Dream, which I think is still my favourite from them, but a very nice follow-up. They're a very good indie rock band, like I said, out of Manchester, even though two of the members are from our home county. Very, very good album, really enjoyed this one, and so it comes in at number 10 on my list. Now, keep in mind, this was a very hard list to put together because I knew what albums I liked the most this year. I'm really just going off which ones I've listened to the most this year.
You was there for a while. I will back you. You were there for a while.
I was out there for a while trying to figure out what 10 albums I wanted to put on my list, but we've done it. And next up, in number 9, is King Cruel's Man Alive album. Yeah, another UK act. He's out of London, I believe, anyway. But this album, he's done albums with his raspy sort of, his deep sort of husky type of voice, and that's been his signature, but he's also had like a hip hop sort of influence to his music. This album is very much a little bit more psychedelic than his previous albums, and while it's not my favourite from him, it's still a good one, as you can tell, because it's in my top 10 of the year. Very good album from him, and I can't wait to see what else he puts out in years to come, because this album really did win me over and, well, made me a bigger fan of King Cruel than I already was. Number 8 goes to Jose James, No Beginning, No End 2. He's had a great year, Jose James. He was reissued late last year for Record Store Day, and he's just had this album out. This album came out earlier on in the year, around the same sort of time that King Cruel and Ozzy Osbourne's albums came out, and unfortunately one that I don't think was talked about as much. Obviously the follow-up to the album he did called No Beginning, No End. He's got songs on here with Aloe Black, which is a fantastic song called Turn Me Up or something like that. Yeah, it's called Turn Me Up with Aloe Black. I've always said his name wrong, but anyway. And he also has a cover on here of Billy Joel's Just the Way You Are, which I think is really incredible. He's sort of R&B, but has also jazz influences in there as well. But yeah, his most recent work, and it's an incredible addition to his discography. And yeah, Jose James comes in, No Beginning, No End 2 comes in at number 8. At number 7, I've gone with an album that some people if you're a fan of this band, some people didn't like it. I really liked it, and when I first listened to it, it wasn't. It's Tame Impala's The Slow Rush at number 7. If you're a fan of this band, you either like this album or you don't like this album that much. When I first listened to it, it was my favourite project from them. After a few more listens, I sort of realised I didn't like this album as much as I liked Currents or Inner Speaker. But there's some great songs on here, like Instant Destiny. Borderline's probably the best track on here. Is It True has a sort of funky feel to it. Lost in Yesterday is a great track. Glimmer's got a sort of 80s, early 90s sort of house feel to it. But which I'm not a massive fan of that track, but it's a very good album, very chilled in some parts, and then gets a bit upbeat again at times, but very good album from Tame Impala, I feel. Worthy of a spot on this list at least, and yeah, definitely an album that is well worth listening to if you're a fan of Tame Impala. They're obviously a band out of Australia, and they have a very psychedelic feel to them, but this album sort of is a bit more experimental than their previous work. Still stays in the realm of being a Tame Impala album, but also they experiment a little bit more with their style on one or two tracks. But very, very good album from Tame Impala. That's why it comes in at number 7. At number 6, this is probably the most 80s sounding album that I've heard this year.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people who have really rated this album, said it's maybe her magnum opus, the album that's really going to boost her career. It's Dua Lipa's Future Nostalgia album. And while I still prefer her first studio album over this one, I do agree it's got a very 80s sound to it. Songs like Don't Start Now, Physical, Levitating, Hallucinate, all very, very good songs. Even the song Boys Will Be Boys grew on me after a while, which I hated when I first listened to it. I sort of don't hate it as much anymore, but I do still have to be in the right mood to be able to listen to the closing track on this album. While this album's definitely been good for Dua's career, I'm still a massive fan of her first album, more so than this one, but I will say it is the most 80s sounding album that's come out this year. And yeah, it's been definitely helped her career quite a bit, and it's been her fame acer, I'll definitely say that. And because of that, it had to be high up on the list, even though I prefer her first, like I keep saying. This is still a great album from her, and I can't wait to see what she puts out after this, if she's had 2 very, very good albums. But if you're going to follow up your debut with something, this is how you do it. Okay, we're getting into the top 5 here, and the top 5 was very hard to put together, particularly because I've loved all 5 of these albums I'm going to talk about. But coming in at 5, and this pains me to do it because this is the album this is probably the first new album I listened to this year, but that's only because it came out in January, like out of nowhere. He dropped this album as a surprise, and yeah, it really had an impact on me when it came out. Eminem's Music to Be Murdered By comes in at number 5. I wanted to put it higher, I did, but what it comes down to is I haven't actually listened to that album as much as I've listened to my top 4. And although I really like a lot of the songs on here, like You Gon' Learn, Darkness, Lock It Up, Those Kind of Nights with Ed Sheeran, surprisingly was a very good song. This album, while it's the best album Eminem's put out in about 10 years, I really do think that he can still do better. And I know he's still trying to recover from the album he put out in 2017, which was not a good album at all. But this is a massive return to form for him. He's still not at the top of his game, but at least it's, the best album, like I said, the best one he's put out in about 10 years. Obviously, when it came out, it did spark up some controversy with one of the songs on here talking about the Manchester bombing at the Ariana Grande concert. But Eminem has always been controversial with his lyrics, and I think he's just trying to do what he did 15 years ago, when he was, or even 20 years ago, when he was, being so controversial, he had people talking, and that is what boosted this album and made it popular again, was, that line. It might have crossed a line that you don't cross, but I'm talking about one of the worst events in recent history, but at least he got people talking, and people were saying his name in sentences. And I can look past that one little line on that. The rest of the album is incredible. Like I said, it may even be the best album he's put out in the last 15 years. I'd go that far. But definitely a good one from Eminem. And yeah, I like it a lot. So I had to put it in my top 5, and it lands at number 5. At number 4 is going to Dreamland from Glass Animals, a band that I only discovered a couple of years ago, but have loved everything they've put out since I've discovered them. Their last album was 4 years ago, and this album is a huge step up from that. It basically goes back to their first album, which is a bit more synth-based, a bit more chilled, and also combines elements of their second. And he's even got a track on here with Denzel Curry called Tokyo Drifting. That's probably my favourite song on this album. But this has been one that has stuck with me since it came out. I haven't been able to forget about it, and as a result, I really love the retro video game style cover as well. Really does say something about this album, but very, very good album. There's parts where it sounds a bit Tangerine Dreamy. There's parts where it gets a bit more upbeat and modern, but still a fantastic album from Glass Animals, and my new favourite from them. So that comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, I don't actually have a physical copy of this album to show you, which I wish I did, but I don't. And therefore I have to just talk about it. It's Run the Jewels' 4th album, RTJ4, my personal favourite rap album of the year, hip hop album of the year. They return with their 4th album, and what an album it is. I wasn't really a massive fan of Run the Jewels before this album came out, but once I got a chance to sit and listen to it properly, I was hooked. And once again, it stuck with me. It was a toss-up between this and the Kid Cudi album as to which one would make my top 10, but Run the Jewels, I just could not help but I couldn't forget about it. Yeah, it sounds like the rest of their work, their stuff's getting a little bit repetitive, which does stop this album being any higher on my list. But it made a new fan in Run the Jewels out of me, so I had to put it high, and for that it comes at number 3. At number 2 is the only jazz album I think this year that really had an influence on me this much, and it would have been number 1. It was so close to being number 1. Naomi Garcia's Source is at number 2, and despite her name, she is British. London-based saxophonist, and this album sounds a lot like Miles Davis, Bitches Brew, a lot of what John Coltrane did back in around that sort of time. Massive influences there, a lot of world influences involved, and just one of the most beautiful and stunning jazz albums I think I've heard in a very, very long time. It definitely reminds me of a lot of the stuff that came out back in the 70s, although I wasn't there to see it. I have listened to a lot of it, and it definitely has that similar sort of feel. It's just a very, very beautiful album, and it's the only, as you can see, it's the only real jazz album that really had an impact on me. And this is her debut, and I just can't wait to see what else she puts out, because if she can kick off a career, a solo career, with something this good, I want to see what else she can do. So yeah, Naomi Garcia's Source comes in at number 2. Time for my number 1. And if you saw my last video, this may not come as a surprise, because well, I'll show you first, and then you can say whether you were surprised or not. But After Hours by The Weeknd is my favourite album of the year. It was a toss-up between this and Naomi Garcia, I will be honest. But what twisted it for me was the fact that I have listened to this album on repeat probably since it came out. And the singles I've listened to on repeat since they came out. Heartless and Blinding Lights, when they came out in the end of 2019, I just could not stop listening to them, and Blinding Lights is my most played song of the year. And I will say, I said it in my last video, but this is maybe The Weeknd's best album in his decade-long career. Blinding Lights has a very 80s feel to it. Heartless has a very modern feel to it, but he basically combines a lot of the elements from all of his albums and puts them into this, and that's sort of what boosts him. And he really did himself wonders for his first 2 singles when he featured in the film Uncut Gems from last year, which I thought he was brilliant in. But yeah, The Weeknd's After Hours has been my most played album of the year. I mean, I've been driving my fiance nuts with how much I've been playing Blinding Lights.
Yes, you have.
I mean, she's probably sick of hearing it.
Yes,
I can't get enough of it. But for that reason, and the fact that she even bought me this as a Christmas present, those are the reasons that this edges over Naomi Garcia for my number 1 spot and becomes my favourite album of 2020. But yep, The Weeknd's After Hours comes in at number 1. That's it for this video, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Obviously, your top 10 is going to be different from mine, so please let me know what your top 10 is of this year. Because there's been a lot of albums that have come out this year that have really had an impact, but obviously I couldn't talk about them all. There's been so many good albums. Like I said at the beginning of the video, 2020 for me has been probably one of the best years for recorded music in a very, very long time. And as a result, it was difficult to do this list. But enough said. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care, and let's hope for the best in 2021. Bye!